Out on the fringe, if you follow the story back, you find the center. Tracing the edge.
You know, my parents always stressed traveling since we were really young. So, you know, I had traveled a fair amount as a kid and I had climbed a lot as a kid. So combining the two wasn't any like big crazy thing in my mind. It was just a natural thing to do. This is all the stuff I cached in Patagonia last year. You know, I've got it even as specific as how many of each size stopper, how many of each side knife blade, lost arrow, all that stuff.
It's late November. Rains have set in the Northwest. Colin polished off Half Dome and El Cap in a single day in Yosemite. He's ready to migrate south to Patagonia for the main event. He's bringing the secret weapon. Whether it's the Himalaya, Patagonia, or the Cascades, this light and fast fanatic has one piece of extraneous weight that travels almost everywhere. An iPod.
Music is definitely kind of a secret little dose of crack when you're about to leave the car on a really, like in the middle of a blizzard or something. And, there's lots of different stuff. Probably the classic is Tool. Just the snow's dumping, every time you open your car door, the seat gets covered in snow, and you're blasting Tool or Alice in Chains or the Melvins. I listen to a lot of grunge, and it probably partly comes from just a little bit of local Pacific Northwest pride, but I think it's quite fitting when you're going out climbing in horrendous weather to listen to this music that was inspired by this horrendous weather.
This year in Patagonia, weather windows were sparse, but Colin still managed to take advantage of sunshine to solo Guillemets and Ramos.
I always thought things through really carefully, and I still do consider myself actually a really cautious climber, which I think a lot of people are like, really? But I consider myself a cautious climber.
Colin has been coming south since he was a teenager. Season by season, he developed his skills. He worked on his Spanish. The dusty, windswept streets of El Chaltén were like a second home. Along the way, he pulled off some incredible ascents, the complete west face of Cerro Torre with Kelly Cordes, and most remarkable of all, the Torre Traverse with Rollo Garibaldi.
Note to self, never forget your hose.
There's no doubt that hard alpine climbing, especially in places like the Himalaya, involves a lot of risk that you can't avoid, and even some risks that you could, but you accept anyways for whatever reason.
During his journey from Cascade summits to the most difficult routes in Alaska and Patagonia, Colin has had his critics.
Some people just assume that, I'm this young climber climbing some difficult alpine routes, so I must be just kind of going for it, totally nuts, like racing, not thinking about stuff. I don't view myself that way whatsoever. If you're living in the Cascades and you're going alpine climbing every single weekend, you'll rack up a lot of alpine climbing experience pretty fast. And I literally mean pretty much every single weekend. There's not many other people I know who alpine climb as often as I do.
Certainly, nobody seems as stoked or to be having as much fun in the mountains.
When climbing in the super alpine environment, under the most extreme conditions, I trust Patagonia clothing to keep me warm and dry.
I don't really think of it as suffering. People use the word suffering in reference to alpine climbing so much these days, and I never feel when I'm alpine climbing like I'm suffering, ever. It feels really hard sometimes, and I feel really cold or really wet or really scared, but I've never viewed it as suffering.
Now, Colin is making a life traveling and climbing. His life is as uncluttered as his backpacks. The continents have changed, but that feeling of standing on top of Forbidden and looking out to the next ridge, seeing the next summit, that hasn't changed at all.
It's all a culmination of every other climb you've ever done. When I was climbing in the Cascades all the time, and when a lot of the climbs in the Cascades were still at my limit, it was a different feeling for sure. You know, I would get on top of something and I would look over and I'd see, oh, that's the so-and-so route. And, you know, I could recognize, you know, this side of the peak from the photo in a guidebook somewhere and be like, oh, that's a really cool route. It's supposed to be hard. I really want to do that. And when I get on top of a high peak in the Cascades and look out on this sea of other peaks, for me now, it's more of just like a playground, and it feels like a home, and I like looking out and thinking about all these memories. The only way I can imagine not climbing in the Cascades would be if I was lucky enough to move to the Alps.
Music today by Ken Christensen off his double disc album Sunlight Shadow. Colin's episodes are brought to you by La Sportiva. Whether it's a 10-foot tall boulder or a 5,000-foot wall of snow and ice, La Sportiva makes the technical footwear for your next big send. For more articles and videos, visit Sportiva.com or catch up with them on Facebook. And of course, none of this would have happened without the generous support of Patagonia. You can catch the newest installment of Tracing the Edge and find other stories and videos online at Patagonia.com. Thanks for watching.